Welcome back to Tam's Classy Creations, the channel where we break down projects so even a beginner can do it. Hello friends, today I'm going to be showing you how to use the continuous bias binding from a previous video. We'll be using Pioneer Woman fabrics today, and I just love her designs. They are beautiful. Please like the video before we get started, and I won't keep you any longer. Let's get into the video. The supplies we need for the video today: some scissors, rulers, marking tools, a template for the rounded corners, and of course I need my continuous bias binding, and then I need some things to go around it. I have these pot holders for an order that I have, and we're going to put the bias binding on it. Now the first thing, we need to prep our bias binding, and what we want to do is fold it in half and press it. Now, I also like to start with a straight seam. So I will just cut that, and that's how we're going to start. Now, if I would have left the corners on this instead of rounding it, we could have cut our binding on the straight of grain. So you cannot go around things with the straight of grain, but bias binding you can use around any corners, and I applied the bias binding to this straight of grain, so you can always use the bias on both straight and rounded, but you cannot use the straight of grain on anything rounded. So now we need to put the bias binding around the pot holder. We're going to start near where I rounded, and you're going to move up 6-7 inches, and we're going to pin or clip this to the edge. Now we're going to start sewing here, and we're going to back stitch, and we're going to go all around putting pins or clips all around. Now when we get to this corner, we're going to go around this corner, and we're going to stop stitching just after we come around the corner, and we're going to back tack it there, and then I'm going to show you how to join these together. Now we're just using a regular 1/4 inch stitch. Now I want to show you the corner, how this bias binding goes around that corner. Now remember, cut on the bias stretches. If we did this on the straight of grain, it would never stretch over there and lay so nice. Now here's the beginning of our bias binding. Remember, we started around the corner right here. So this was cut 2 1/4 inches. So I need to see the end, and we need to do this in the middle of our opening. So we need a 2 1/4 inch cut. So I'm going to make a mark. I have my ruler here at 2 1/4. So it is 2 1/4 inches from here to here, and then I'm going to clip this. Now, this is 2 1/4 inches from this edge of the binding on this side and this edge. So either you can make a mark on the binding at the 2 1/4. You can also make it from the binding underneath. What you want to do then, after you have that mark, you want to flip your binding over and just make that mark on the other side. Now we want to make a line from this corner to here where we made the mark. This is going to become our stitching line. Okay, we have our stitching line in. Now what we're going to do is pick up both ends of the binding, and we're going to open them both up like this. See, I just picked them up. They're just up. and I'm going to bring this one this way, just like that, and I would pin this right here. I'll fix that. And then that is going to be our stitching line, and you know you have it right if this edge with both of them attached is going to be a triangle. So let me show you this again. We have our mark at the 2 1/4, and remember how I got the 2 1/4. Binding is usually 2 1/4 or 2 1/2. Whatever size your binding is, that is how long you cut it. So I flip it up, I should say, make my mark. Then I drew my diagonal line. Then I pick up both of my bindings and I sandwich them going, you know, probably a 45-degree angle. But anyway, I'm going to pin it here. And this is going to be our stitching line right here. If you stitch this right, if you open up the stitching, it should be a square. So I always check this before I go and cut. We're going to cut this for a 1/4 inch seam, but before I do that, I want to make sure, yes, we got it right. The binding lays right. So I'm going to go and cut this, and then we're going to stitch the rest of the bias binding on the pot holder. Now you can either finger press this seam down, or you can take it to your ironing board. And then we're going to get it ready to make our 1/4 inch seam. And we're going to be stitching from where we left off to the other side. Now with the 1/4 inch seam, remember to back stitch at the beginning and end. Now, all done except for turning it. Now you can hand stitch this or machine stitch it. I prefer hand stitching, but look at how good it goes around the corners because it's the bias. It stretches right over the corners really nice. I'm still using that bias binding, the continuous one, in a previous video. I did the same process on this round pot holder. I started in about 5 or 6 inches, did my 1/4 inch, and I left an opening so I could close my binding. Now, even though this is round, first I want to show you, even on a whole round thing, this bias binding looks so nice going around. I love it on these round pot holders, but this process is just a little bit trickier, but it's still the same. So what you want to do is just line your binding up like you're sewing it on. Then you overlap this one, and remember, you're going to overlap it the same 2 1/4 inches like the last one, and you're going to have your marking right here. You're going to make that mark, and then you're going to cut your binding, and you're going to do the same exact thing. I hope this video was helpful to you. You really can bind anything with bias binding. If you want to know how to make continuous bias binding, click here. If you have any sewing projects, ideas, or concepts you'd like me to go over, leave it in the comments. Well, that's all I have for you today. See you in the next video.